When asked about a possible third Spider-Man game, Insomniac's creative director Brian Intihar likened the sequel to the MCU's Captain America: Civil War. Speaking on Friends Per Second podcast with Skill Up Team, conversation with the developer turned to a hypothetical third main game in Insomniac's Spider-Man series. Intihar was understandably quiet for a good while, clearly not wanting to give too much of the studio's future plans away. However, after some careful deliberation, the developer said whatever could happen next would undoubtedly be pretty epic. If Spider-Man 1 was like our Iron Man and Spider-Man 2 was like a Civil War, so where logically do we go from there, said Intihar. While the creative director did not give an outright answer, he coyly said he believes it would be pretty epic. Did anyone else just immediately think of Infinity War and Endgame there, and have no doubt that Spider-Man games won't finish on the second part because the sequel itself ended on a cliffhanger. So let's figure out what the threequel could be about. There will be major spoilers for the second game ahead. First, let's start with what we've already been shown in Spider-Man 2. We were finally revealed the arc of symbiotes, showing us the canonical black suit and Peter Parker starting to become Venom's hostage. After all this time, we got a real villainous Venom, not some kind of anti-hero version by Tom Hardy. Honestly, Insomniac's Venom turned out to be one of the best. I think I wasn't the only one who liked the plot of the game, and there's no point in focusing on an already released project, because that's not what you came for. What's more important are the words spoken by Brian Intihar. He directly hinted, comparing the Insomniac games with Marvel movies, that a direct continuation of the main story awaits us. In the end, Peter, thanks to Martin Lee and Miles, got a new symbiotic suit, Anti-Venom. When Miles and Peter defeated Venom by destroying all of his offspring across New York, Anti-Venom is still alive. Next, we see an embittered Norman Osborn, who earlier asked Spider-Man to save Harry from the bottom of his heart. Now he totally hates him and will want revenge for not honoring his request. The game itself ends on a classic happy ending. The villains have been defeated, Peter and MJ now have more free time to strengthen their relationships. All the protagonists are having a good time together. It seemed like a perfect ending, but it wasn't. In a post-credits scene, we are given a direct teaser for the plot of Spider-Man 3. Norman visits Otto Octavius in Raft Prison. He asks him about the secret identity of Spider-Man. Naturally, this is a hint that the main villain of the threequel will be the Green Goblin. Fans have been waiting for him since the very first game, but the authors saved him for the epic finale of the trilogy. I personally thought that they would show the design of the Goblin himself at the end of the second part, but okay. However, Norman is now bitter towards Peter and will do anything to destroy him as a hero and as a person. The analogy comes from No Way Home, when Willem Dafoe's Goblin, even from another reality, was pure evil for Spider-Man. Norman Osborn has a personal connection to Parker. In many comic books and adapted stories, Osborn is either a business partner, employer, or friend of Peter's, creating a complex and emotionally charged dynamic between the two characters. This personal connection adds a layer of tragedy to their conflict. Goblin is responsible for some of the most iconic and heartbreaking moments in Peter's storyline. One of the most famous examples is the death of Gwen Stacy in the night Gwen Stacy died. This tragic event is often considered a turning point in Spider-Man comics and has had a lasting impact on the character's development. These facts may indicate that we cannot expect a happy ending in the threequel, and then there's a possible spoiler. I have a theory that the trilogy will end with the death of Peter Parker. We've already gotten to know him closely, and there's no point in dragging out his storyline further. You know, now you will begin to understand what Brian Intihar was leading to. The entire Infinity Saga in MCU ended with the death of the most important character, Tony Stark, and such a plotline in the Insomniac franchise can become a gem. I think it's better to kill Parker, because there's someone to continue his work, and it's not just Miles, but Harry Osborn as well. We'll come back to this topic a little later, and you'll understand what I really mean. In general, the iconic conflict of Green Goblin and Spider-Man will become the center of the plot in the third game. Most likely in the finale, Parker will die saving MJ. I think Norman already has the serum and glider, so the threequel will not reveal his classic origin. I'm already very interested to see how Insomniac artists will portray the Green Goblin, whether his design will be closer to the classics or to the ultimates, but even in the first game, you could find some Easter eggs in Osborn's penthouse in the form of mentioning about the development of glider and bombs, and as well as helmets, which can become a part of Green Goblin's armor in the third part. I also noticed how the mask around the mouth could be interpreted as a sharp-toothed smile. However, the success of the third game is already guaranteed because the clash between the Green Goblin and Spider-Man is what all gamers are waiting for. As for other villains, I'd love to see Morbius. The movie with Jared Leto seemed to ruin the entire impression of this character, and it seems only Insomniac has a chance to show him at his best. And the further fate of Harry Osborn is also unknown. Many began to think that he would become the second Goblin, but honestly, it would be too predictable and stupid. We already got a best friend villain with a great background, and if they turn him into the Goblin in Spider-Man 3, it will be a repetition of the same plot. I'd like to see the Jackal. Several Spider-Man villains have adopted the Jackal persona over the years, but the very first to do so was Miles Warren. This mild-mannered biology professor develops an unhealthy obsession with Gwen Stacy, and following her death at the hands of the Green Goblin, swears vengeance on Parker after initial reports suggest that he was the one to blame. Though he does square off against Spider-Man from time to time, much of Jackal's best moments have come from his manipulation of others, and it's ultimately through these means that he's able to learn the web-slinger's true identity. He later goes on to clone Parker as well as create multiple clones of himself, but he's ultimately manipulated and outsmarted by the Green Goblin. The Jackal fits perfectly into the plot of the third game. You can also add some evil clone of Peter Parker like Kane or Doppelganger to it, and the threequel will be even more interesting. I think I'll also make a separate video only about the possible villains. Brian Intihar is not the only one to allude to Insomniac's potential webby future. Earlier this month, senior narrative director John Paquette hinted at a possible Venom spin-off in an interview with Insider. So here's what we're doing. We're focused on Spider-Man 2, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna wait to see how the fans react, he said when asked about a Venom spin-off. At this time, the developer said the studio was going to be listening to what the fans want, but first the team was going to be taking a well-earned break. That being said, given how impressive and well-received the launch of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 has been, I think it is fairly safe to say that we haven't seen the last of Insomniac's Spider-Men. There are plenty of villains and plotlines for the third game. In the scene where Norman Osborn visits Octavius in prison, Otto mentions that he's preparing the final chapter. This is a clear hint that Dr. Octopus has a grand plan. This plan most likely involves assembling a new team of villains, perhaps something akin to the Sinister Six. For the trilogy's climax, such a storyline would be fitting and epic. The creators are clearly teasing the return of Dr. Octopus. Now, he along with Osborn will gather a new team with a fresh lineup. It could be the Sinister 12. Despite the deaths of characters like Scorpion and Kraven, the Spider-Man universe still has plenty of other potential villains that can be used in a next game. Some of them can be woven into the storyline, while others may appear as part of the Sinister team. Among most possible candidates, I can mention Kraven's stepbrother, known as the Chameleon. He didn't show up in the sequel, but he definitely exists in Insomniac's universe. He was also part of the Sinister 12 in the comics, and his appearance in the new part could be justified by Kraven's death. Additionally, in the second game, Peter and Yuri encounter a pyromaniac cult led by someone named the Flame. During one of the missions, he steals a symbiote which later turns red, hinting at Carnage. As you can see, there's no shortage of villains for the threequel, so the third Spider-Man will serve as the culmination of Peter Parker's story, and the developers aim to make it truly epic with a battle against a bunch of villains and the potential heroic death of the main character at the very end. Subscribe.